Hello, my name is Ivy. The question I was curious about and wanted to dive deeper into was how has the Holocaust been portrayed in movies? The reason why I chose this topic is because of how movies can have a very large impact on people. Movies are consumed on the daily by millions for entertainment, education, as an escape from reality. Movie making is a form of art, one which is composed of visuals and audio. The emotions conveyed through the actors' expressions and voices, cinematography, and storytelling in a movie can connect with people in ways nothing else can, which is why it's so important how events in history like the Holocaust are portrayed in movies, as they can influence and change how people view them. I wanted to see if what I've learned in school about the Holocaust matches with how it's portrayed in movies. I chose 5 movies to present today: Ida, The Counterfeits, Denial, The Pianist, and In Darkness. I will be explaining how the Holocaust was portrayed in the movies, its impact and influence on the character's mind and our mind, and the movie's global impact. Before I go on, I want to preface that my presentation contains spoilers about all 5 movies. Ida is set in 1962 Poland and tells the story of Anna, who is about to take her vows to become a nun. However, by order of the Mother Superior in the convent, has to visit her only living relative, her Aunt Wanda, before taking her final vows. Not long after Anna arrives at Wanda's living quarters, Wanda informs Anna that her real name is not Anna, but Ida, and that she is Jewish. Ida decides she wants to visit her parents' graves, but is told that most, if not all, Jewish victims during the war were buried all over the place, and Ida would never find their bodies. Even so, Ida is persistent, so the 2 women begin their journey to learn what happened to Ida's parents and Wanda's son, who we later find out was with Ida's parents and where they were buried. Although Ida was set years after the Holocaust, we can see that the war and the Holocaust shadow was still present in the later generations. Ida was a film about confronting and discovering the past. It begged the question, what do you do with that information? Would it enable you, motivate you to dig deeper into the past and punish the wrongdoers and bring to light the tragedies Jews faced? Or would learning about your past destroy you on the inside, swallow you whole, and make you cry at the bitter injustices the Jews had to bear? In Ida, we can see that our 2 main characters responded very differently to the truth of their family's passing. Wanda, after learning of the truth behind her son's death, grows more and more depressed. She brings up pictures of Ida's parents, her son, and herself. We then cut to what I like to call a time-lapse of Wanda's day. We watch Wanda make breakfast, smoke during her bath, then put on music and open her window. Wanda walks in and out of the camera frame before beelining towards the open window and then jumps before falling to her death. Ida, on the other hand, returned back to the convent to take her final vows. She seemed to be just fine. However, during Ida's stay at Wanda's apartment before the funeral, Ida started to imitate Wanda's way of life. She copied how Wanda dressed, started smoking, drinking, and dancing. Ida even went to a bar and hooked up with the man who I assume Ida had mutual affection for. In bed, they talked about getting a dog, marrying, and having children. Ida was smiling and even seemed to be looking forward to that future. Even so, Ida returned back to the convent, and that's where the movie ended. The movie portrayed the effects the Holocaust had on the later generations. The devastation, shock, and sorrow of families of the Jewish survivors and non-survivors were presented brilliantly in Ida. Ida gave us examples of the many ways family members of Holocaust victims reacted when told of their family's past. Ida had been selected as Best Film of 2014 by the European Film Academy and as Best Film Not in the English Language 2014 by the British Academy of Film and Television Arts. In 2015, it won the Academy Award for Best Language Film, being the first Polish film to do so. In 2016, the film was named as the 55th best film of the 21st century from a poll of 177 film critics from around the world. On Rotten Tomatoes, the critical consensus read, "Empathetically written, splendidly acted, and beautifully photographed." Ida found director Paweł Pawlikowski revisiting his roots to powerful effect. The Counterfeiters is a true story about Operation Bernhard, the largest counterfeiting operation in history, carried out by Nazi Germany in World War II. Our main character, Salomon Sorswich, is the king of counterfeits. He was a master of forging money, ID cards, passports, etc., but was caught and thrown into the Mauthausen concentration camp by Superintendent Friedrich Herzog. After 5 long years of labor, handpicked for their various skills in forgery, Sally and some other Jews were selected to be transported to Sachsenhausen, another concentration camp, to produce fake foreign currencies like the British pound and the US dollar. This was called Operation Bernhard, which aimed to flood and destroy the British and US economies by producing and circulating vast amounts of forged money. Sally and the other Jews are then introduced to the large team already working on the project, and Herzog appoints Sally as the leader of the team. The team succeeds in forging the British pound, but the success of the US dollar is hindered by Adolf Berger. Sally and Berger argue over the moral implications of their actions if they succeeded in forging the US dollar, which would lengthen the war and help the Nazis. In the film, Sally is faced with the decision on whether to forge the US dollar or not, whether to save their own lives and watch as their own kind be killed, or risk their own lives for the greater good. The counterfeits delved into an aspect rarely shown in Holocaust movies, which is how, in addition to everything the Jews had already lost, we tend to overlook the fact that they were also deprived of their jobs, professions, and passions. The movie showed us the behind the scenes of the largest counterfeiting operation in history, Operation Bernhard. The people behind it, their hard work, struggles, and ironically, their privilege. We were introduced to a part of the concentration camps we have rarely seen and learned about. Sally and the rest of the team were given decent food, comfortable beds, and although little, a small extent of freedom. The counterfeiters focused on our main character Sally and what he would do to survive. This is played out between Sally and Adolf Berger, who was an idealistic communist.
Das Leben ist das Einzige, was wir noch
Worum geht es dir eigentlich? Geht es dir wirklich darum zu überleben oder geht es dir darum, allen zu beweisen, dass du den Dollar schaffst?
Berger intentionally sabotaged with the negative for the US dollar as he didn't want to aid the Nazis at all, but this put the whole team's life in jeopardy. This conflict of views and interests sparks an interesting debate. If you were in that type of situation, what would you do? I think for the most part, the majority of people would agree with Berger's views, but would not follow through with it. I think most people understand that nothing will change if they didn't do anything, but it's hard to sacrifice yourself and the people you love when you haven't actually been in a situation where you have truly felt helpless. The Counterfeiters won the 2007 Best Foreign Language Film Oscar at the 80th Academy Awards, and Stefan Ruzowitzki, the director of the film, was nominated for the Golden Bear Award at the 2007 Berlin International Film Festival. On Rotten Tomatoes, the critical consensus stated, "The Counterfeiters is a gripping account of one prisoner's moral dilemma, superbly portrayed by Karl Markovits." Denial is based on the book History on Trial, My Day in Court with a Holocaust Denier. The story follows Deborah Lipstadt, an American professor of Holocaust studies, who, when giving a speech, was interrupted by David Irving, a Nazi German scholar. In Deborah's book, Denying the Holocaust, David was declared a Holocaust denier. On the grounds that Deborah's book had ruined his well-regarded career as a historian by accusing him of deliberately distorting facts, David filed a libel lawsuit against Deborah and her publisher. In the UK, the burden of proof in a libel case is on the accused, so Deborah and her legal team had to prove that the Holocaust had happened. Like the title suggests, the novel was about Holocaust denial and how it's still an ongoing problem in modern society. The novel recounts the true story of Deborah Lipstadt, forced to defend herself in court to prove the Holocaust was a true event. In the beginning of the movie, Deborah is giving a lecture on the 4 basic assertions for Holocaust denial. Deborah asks her students a question: how do we know the Holocaust happened? There is no photographic evidence of a Jew in a gas chamber, as the Germans made sure of it. Exactly how can we prove that the Holocaust had happened? How have people proven that the Holocaust hadn't happened? To understand the Holocaust more, Deborah and barrister Richard Rampton fly to Auschwitz and get toured around. They enter a building that was used to delouse the prisoners' clothing with Zyklon B. Richard asks for proof. However, the hydrogen cyanide that was supposed to be in the brickwork was chipped away by a man illegally and smuggled away. That same man also claimed he found higher traces of HCN in the delousing chambers than in the supposed gas chambers. From that, he concluded that no human beings were killed at Auschwitz, only lice. Therefore, the Holocaust hadn't happened. This was one of the many ways people denied the Holocaust. However, if people researched a little more, they would have found that it takes 20 times more cyanide to kill lice than human beings. This is a great example of the phenomenon that is that most people in modern society swallow up whatever the media says that is true and believes them. We take things at face value and don't try to figure out if it's true or not, if it's an objective truth or a subjective truth. The novel was nominated for the AARP Annual Movies for Grown-Ups Awards and the British Academy Film Awards for Best Supporting Actor and Best British Film. On Rotten Tomatoes, the critical consensus read, "If the novel doesn't quite do its incredible story complete justice, it comes close enough to offer a satisfying, impactful drama," and another powerful performance from Rachel Weisz. The Pianist is a true story about Władysław Szpilman, who worked as a pianist for the local radio. The movie begins in Warsaw, Poland in 1939 at the outbreak of World War II. Władysław and his family were wealthy, and while aware of the threatening presence of German soldiers and Hitler's plans for Poland, believed, like many others, that the Nazis were just all bark but no bite. However, their views were unfortunately shattered when a German bomb exploded outside the radio Władysław was performing a recital. Władysław and his family were forced into the Warsaw Ghetto and eventually to the trains deporting to labor camps, but Władysław escaped. We then watch Władysław travel and hide place to place with the help of non-Jews he previously knew. Władysław witnessed countless uprisings such as the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising before being saved by Allied troops and getting his job back as a pianist for a Polish radio. The Pianist offers a very objective view in displaying the Holocaust, opting to give an honest portrayal rather than a melodramatic one. The Pianist, unlike other Holocaust movies, does not portray Szpilman as a hero. The film is not your typical hero overcomes tragedies, but a realist view in the fact that most victims of the Holocaust were survivors, not heroes. Most movies like to focus on a protagonist who is an idealist, who actively wanted to make a change, and who had courage and strength. There is nothing wrong with this, but you must remember that those types of people were only a very small percentage. Although it might put a bad taste in your mouth, Spilsman only survived because of his connections and through sheer luck. He was simply a victim to his surroundings. He, like many others, was a bystander who didn't go out of his way to help others, and whose only desire was to survive. Spillman lived through many historical events during the Holocaust, such as the first bombings on Poland and the beginning of the Warsaw Uprising. He watched as his family was shoved into the trains transporting to the concentration camps while he escaped, people he considered friends be shot in front of him, and friends who gave him a place to stay and food to eat disappear. It's hard to imagine the impact this can have on your mental health, especially since you were still alive, although barely, while everyone around you breathed their last. What would you be thinking, alone in your thoughts, while gunshots and bombs were going off and people were dying? How many people were in that type of situation and blamed themselves for surviving while those they loved perished? Who wanted to stop trying? The Pianist premiered at the 2002 Cannes Film Festival on the 24th of May, where it won the Palme d'Or, the highest prize awarded. At the 75th Academy Awards, The Pianist won Best Director, Best Adapted Screenplay, and Best Actor, and was nominated for 4 more. The film also won the British Academy of Film and Television Arts Award for Best Film and for Best Direction in 2003. It was also included in BBC's 100 Greatest Films of the 21st Century in 2016. On Rotten Tomatoes, the critical consensus read, "Well acted and dramatically moving. The Pianist is Polanski's best work in years." In Darkness tells a true story of a rescue of Jewish refugees in the German-occupied city Lvov, Poland. Our main character, Leopold Socha, is a Polish sewer maintenance worker. He, along with his co-worker Szczepak Wróblewski, hid and protected a group of Jews that were hiding in the sewers from the Nazis in exchange for money. The two demanded to be paid daily for their help, but even after the Jews' money had ran out, they still helped and protected the group, even though it could cost them their life.
Czekajcie tu, zaraz wrócę.
In Darkness was a film that did not shy away from showing the nightmarish conditions of the Nazi genocide. As I was watching the movie, I pitied the victims and despised the villains, the victims being the Jews, and the villains the Nazi soldiers. I saw a part of myself in Socha, who was vulnerable, but brave. At the start, Socha only decided to help the group of Jews for the money, but later continued to do so out of a sense of moral obligation. In Darkness showed the gradual progression of a Polish with anti-Semitic views to someone later recognized as a member of the righteous among the nations. In Darkness also reminded us the fact that the everyday Pole knew what was happening to the Jews, but didn't do anything to stop it. For example, as Socha and Szczepak were walking through the forests, they stumbled upon the scene of a group of naked women being chased and then shot by German soldiers. However, the two men didn't seem surprised, like this was just a daily occurrence, and not a traumatic experience where people were being murdered right before their eyes. Instead of thinking, "Oh my goodness, people are being murdered," the two instead reacted to the fact that they were German soldiers. The two were more scared of getting caught by the soldiers than people being shot in front of them. This puts into perspective the mindset of most Poles and their actions, or lack thereof. In Darkness was nominated for the Best Foreign Language Film at the 84th Academy Awards. At the International Valladolid Film Festival, Agnieszka Holland won the award for Best Director. The film garnered several award nominations at the 32nd Genie Awards, including Best Adapted Screenplay for Shamoon. It also received the Grand Prix at the 7th Batumi International Art House Film Festival. Although each movie showed a different aspect of the Holocaust, the underlying meaning behind each one was to educate us and show us the suffering the victims had faced. Most, if not all, Holocaust movies made to memorialize and help people remember the past. Ida demonstrated how people handled and coped with the devastation of the past. It showed me that the Holocaust was not something of the past, as it still had an impact later on, and forever will. The Counterfeiters was a film that taught me what Operation Bernhard was, and the people behind it. The movie focused on morally gray characters, which helped me better understand the impact one risks themselves and others for the greater good. The contrast made me feel much more appreciation for the 0.1% of rescuers who gambled with their lives, as I was presented with the struggles of them doing so. The novel showed me a somewhat recent case of Holocaust denial. The movie provided me the arguments behind Holocaust denial and evidence of how they backed it up with facts. The Pianist offered me a documentation of the life of a Holocaust survivor and what they went through. The film allowed me to see the persecution of the Jews more intimately, not as data and numbers and words in a textbook. In Darkness taught me about the life of someone recognized as a righteous among the nations. It showed, and in a way, humanized the rescuers for me. In some ways, I just couldn't believe someone would actually risk their own life for people they didn't even know. In Darkness documented the process of someone who's indifferent to the Jews, to actively helping them, which solidified my belief that people can change. And that brings us to the end of my presentation. Although quite long, I hope you have taken something away to think about. I also hope I evoked a desire inside of you to dig deeper into the meanings or lessons of movies you watch, as I did with Ida, The Counterfeits, The Now, The Pianist, and In Darkness. If you ever decide to watch any of these movies, you might discover a meaning to it different to mine, which is the beauty of movies as they are always up to interpretation. Thank you for listening.